Hello, Kim. This is Darcella.
Hi, I'm Kim. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure. I think I just saw Eric. Oh, there we go. Hi, Eric.
Greetings.
Hey, Eric. I just want to see if you can hear me.
Here.
I turned my video on, but you guys would be looking at the back wall today. I've got so much stuff to do.
No worries.
Can you hear me now?
Eric, can you hear me?
So I can't hear Eric either.
Can you hear me, Darcella?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
And I can hear Kim when she's on.
Interesting.
I can hear
Eric,
you
I can
very
hear
faintly,
you.
Eric.
All right, let me try again. How's now?
It's a little
I
better.
mean, yeah, a little
I'm
better.
gonna have to adjust my microphone here. Thank you.
I think we'll just have to be quiet when you're talking.
I'm trying out a new co-working space as well, so there's that.
Listen, I know how that goes.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on mute so you don't hear all the noise behind me that's about to happen.
Okay.
Hey, Chad.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh,
Hi,
life is
Chad.
good. Could have won the lottery, but other than that, all good.
Chad, I keep forgetting you're like, what, 14 hours ahead of us, or?
Yeah, it's 5 in the morning.
Oh, man, that's dedication.
I'm usually up, so it's all good. Reminder comes up and I remind myself to get dressed so I can say hi.
Where are you right now?
Right now I'm in Ipswich, just outside of Brisbane in Australia.
Nice.
Queensland up on the north side.
I vote that we have our next meeting there.
Then I really have to get dressed.
Right, right.
It's 3:02, and it looks like we've got, there's 6 of us on the call.
Well, that's pretty good. That's excellent. Let's see. So I'm adding the agenda into the chats just in case.
Okay.
And we'll add that again as folks add in. I think as folks come on, they don't see anything before when they join the call in terms of chat. I'm not totally sure on that, but that's been some of my experience. I should probably get most of my face. Sorry for you all, but most of my face in the camera. And we'll wait I don't know. Let's see, probably just a couple more minutes.
Sure.
All right. What do y'all think?
I think
We
we
should
have a
just-
few more people. We should probably keep going.
Let's see. Let me see what I've got. So if I had the luxury of, on previous calls, I had the luxury of like a dual screen kind of thing. So I'd have one screen for notes and everything. Right now, I'm just, the one screen thing, I don't know how folks do it, including myself. So I'm back to that.
So I just installed an update to my Surface, and my keyboard is not working. So I have to use my screen to touch my screen to do anything until I figure out what happened.
Oh, I hate that. So let's see. Well, we'll dive in. And the good thing is we dive in with quick intros. One of the things that, why do we do a quick intro? One of the things that is particularly, I think, important for this group is we're working to build this collaborative culture. So making sure that we kind of know who all is involved. We have a little bit of sense of who we are as individuals. All that kind of stuff really helps. Not just, it sort of builds plants the seeds for just awareness, but also, building trust and all those kinds of things. So it's good to get to know the folks who are involved in these. And it takes a little bit of time, but I think we find it valuable in general. And I think it's particularly important for this kind of call. So that's why we do that kind of thing. Let's see. So there's a couple different ways that we sometimes do an intro. Sometimes it's just like a name and an organization, which doesn't give us a ton of information. Since we have only a handful of folks on this call, we might have an opportunity to go into maybe a little bit deeper. So let's see. So if we can, let's just have name, organization. What's our icebreaker for today? What's something you like about the collaboration that's already happening in your community? And just brief version of that, like a couple sentences. If you can share a little bit about that, that helps us to get to know you, what you like, and what's going on in your world. I will start with Chad because he's up earlier than anyone.
Great, thanks. So my name is Chad Ronaldo. I do a field role as Director for Startup Status, where I'm mapping and measuring the entrepreneur ecosystem for Australia, working on both data and collaborative bodies and regions, and also the Global Entrepreneurship Network Acting Director for Australia. Things that I like that are happening with regards to collaboration in my community. We are seeing a growing awareness to get like-minded actors together, to get the universities, to get the investors. It's still early and we're trying to figure out how to do it, but there's definitely the intent. I just look forward to seeing that intent turn into something kind of specific that breaks down some of the state by state or region by region parochial barriers, but promising early starts.
We also, sometimes we do this popcorn thing. Does anyone want to step up or do you want to hand off to someone?
Yeah, I'll go Kim because she just came on board. We'll head over to Kim.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim, and I live in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm with a nonprofit called Lighthouse Way, and we do education research, and we do like program evaluation, other things like that. I got interested in entrepreneurship because I participated in the Kaufman Research Bootcamp last over the summer, and I also attended the conference. So I'm very new to this field, I guess, and so I'm just like kind of taking everything in and just kind of exploring and getting to know what all is going on.
Is there something you see in your community, and community doesn't necessarily need to be your neighborhood. That could be something that you're doing nationally or internationally. Is there something that you're seeing, a good example of collaboration that's happening where you are?
I would say, I guess in Lawrence, I guess a lot of like the arts community really, I guess, interact with each other. So we have like, some of the standard arts organizations, like just your typical organization that like has art classes, but then we're seeing collaboration between like those organizations and like smaller arts-based organizations in terms of like collaborating, in terms of doing programming together. So I see a lot of that. And so I'm still kind of new to that community too. And so trying to figure out who all is involved and just kind of connecting with people.
And let's see, do you see, Kim, do you see a name or a number that you don't recognize and you'd like to you'd like to hear from?
How about Beth?
Hey, sorry for no film today, no video, but I'm Beth Zimmer from Erie, Pennsylvania, and the organization I work for is called the Innovation Collaborative. And the collaboration that I like to see going on, or that's a little bit different in our community, is the collaboration amongst the craft breweries and the wineries. They're competitors in a sense, but they realize their collective can help really build an industry here in Erie and attract a lot of attention. So that's going really well, and I think they're setting a fine example for others that could benefit from collaboration. I will popcorn to Darcella.
Hi, just a second, sorry. So, hi, I'm Darcella. I operate the Veterans Business Resource Center. We're a nonprofit agency out of St. Louis that helps veterans and military families with startup and expansion of small business. We have a huge footprint, so we have all of Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, and Southern Illinois. Yay. Let's see, a collaboration that I have seen go really well is we have something here in St. Louis called the St. Louis Collective, where it's a collective of a lot of ESOs that have gotten together from every different part of entrepreneurship and said, we're going to agree on 4 things to move the entire ecosystem. And it's going pretty well. It's taken 2 years to get to that point, but it's going well. And I will throw it over to 503.
Hi, this is Patricia. I'm Patricia Beckman in the Seattle area. I am sort of unemployed right now. I work as a consultant for a number of startup companies. When I started getting involved in entrepreneurship was quite a long time ago. I was a Kauffman Fellow with Victor, so that'll kind of date me a little bit. But I've also worked with a variety of startups, mainly in the life science arena, because I'm a biochemist and worked in industry for many years, but also as a venture capitalist. But the flip side of all of this that I kind of want to focus my attention on is we set up an entrepreneurship summit here in the Seattle area for the state about maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. That was co-sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation, and it kind of congealed a lot of things. At that point, I was working with Life Science Washington Institute, which was a nonprofit, working with specifically life science, and we came up with a number of things that we wanted to do in the state, but then it all kind of fell apart. The funding for the Institute fell apart, and so I left that group. But there's another piece that I actually want to focus on, which is broader, and that is the Cascadia Corridor, which is really coming together for a variety of economic development arenas and areas, from Vancouver, BC, all the way down to Portland. And so there's a conference coming up in October in which people from high tech and biotech and a variety of different areas and transportation are all getting together to talk about how we can establish this collaborative culture in the Cascadia Corridor and be better sources for each other. I can't see anything because I'm on my phone, so I don't know who's on. So I will let somebody else just jump in.
Hey, this is Eric. I'll jump in, but also Patricia, what was your last name, please?
My last name is Beckman, Beckmann.
Great. I just want to make, so I'm taking notes. One thing we'll ask in a second is if anybody wants to chime in and help us take notes. We find it a little bit easier, but also it kind of helps depending on how you like to engage with other folks. Sometimes that really helps some people get involved. That's also good. I will just mention, so my name's Eric Renz Whitmore. I actually work now for Forward Cities, which is a recent development, but I am based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And one thing that I'm in a co-working space that does a collaboration with something that launched about 1.5 years ago. We're doing a lot of blockchain development locally. So there's a blockchain summit coming up, and I've loved seeing the different businesses, organizations, and institutions coming together to do that. So that's my local collaboration that I like, and I will hand off to Hassan.
Hi everyone, Hassan Bazi in Detroit. I wear a bunch of different hats here. I work as a director of regional opportunities for a nonprofit. I also serve on various boards for an accelerator one for the oldest public market in the country. Also serve on the Chamber of Commerce board and do work with the DDAs. As far as collaboration, I think probably one of the greatest collaborations that we've had in the Detroit area was via the New Economy Initiative, which New Economy Initiative is an initiative out of the Community Foundation here in Southeast Michigan. And probably going back about 4 or 5 years, they started convening a lot of the stakeholders in the region, so business support organizations, folks from the universities, folks from venture capital, micro lenders, and they have a work table that meets quarterly. And what I've seen over the last few years in terms of collaboration among folks who were disconnected from each other has just been amazing. And I will go over to Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Nope. I don't think my thing does.
Yeah, I can hear you, Daniel.
Okay, good. I'm Dan Steiker. I'm with New Sun Rising. We're based in Pittsburgh. We actually do a lot of programming. We're pretty agnostic as far as if it's for-profit, nonprofit, or communities. So we do a lot of place-based work as well as incubator programs. Our collaboration has happened organically for the most part until probably last year, where we're exploring more of how we can make it more intentional as far as the collaboration goes. But we are a part of a group of intermediaries and funders at this point. But we're trying to get our program participants to start thinking as a collective impact and collaborate more together as well. Thank you. I think that's it. Right.
Dan, what was the name of your organization?
New Sun Rising.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anyone
And
else.
I'll unmute myself. I don't think there's anybody else here either. Let me just take a quick little roll call. Oh, fantastic. I love this. Okay. So let's see what we've going on. So I've posted again, if you are in the group chat, or if you can make it to the, let's see if you can make it to the, what do we call that dashboard. You can find information about call agendas, notes. The call agenda, what's happening with that is that we are, basically it's including the notes from any previous calls. So at the end of, I don't know, 16 years, this will probably be a very long document, but you know, we'll see what we can do in the meantime. Let's see, so what we're working on now, I'll just give a quick overview of what we're talking about today, and then kind of see how folks want to chime in and not. So we've done our little quick intro. We'll get into updates in a second. There's only just a couple of, I think, relatively minor updates, but they may be bigger than I think. One of the things we were interested in talking about is projects, how project teams work. Seeing if there's anybody on the call that's been participating in any of the project teams. And then go on to further discussion about how we can encourage more collaborative culture and get these project teams going. So that's kind of the general look for today's call. Let's see. So I'll jump into some general updates, and Hassan, if you want, just chime in. Please feel free to chime in, whatever. Or if anybody else has some stuff, we'll provide some opportunity to do that as well for other updates that are kind of important. One thing I'll say about this is sometimes a little bit difficult, at least for those of us who are helping manage these calls, is we're trying to operate these meeting groups and the work that happens on Slack as sort of a field level conversation. In other words, how do we help shape the field going forward so that the folks who are working as ecosystem builders, how do we encourage them to be more collaborative, their ecosystems or their work around ecosystems to be more inclusive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons why we have all these goals. But there's certainly a recognition that all of these are, interwoven in lots and lots of different ways. And you can make an argument that almost all of these goals really apply to the other goals as well. The biggest thing that's happened more recently is, I want to say about a week and a half ago, the folks, the catalysts. So there's the folks from Kauffman Foundation proper, including Andy Stoll and I'm going to space out her name. That's terrible. But also Cecilia and Christine have been working to help catalyze and bring together these different working groups around different goals. What they did last week is they released information about who all had contributed to the hackathons that took place during the ESHIP Summit, and we're working on project teams at that time to kind of move those forward. So and what we're doing right now is we're transitioning from, as they say, everything before this was, there was kind of we got into the design phase at the most recent ESHIP Summit, and now we're heading into the deliver phase. How do we actually had a lot of good talk. We've got a lot of good work so far, but how do we actually turn into delivering product solutions, et cetera, that are going to help benefit ecosystem builders throughout the field? So that's kind of where we're at now. In order to do that, they've identified, or we all, the people who have been participating so far, have identified several projects to help do that. So the big thing that was released last week was, here are the folks who've been involved with those projects, but also if you're interested in getting involved in a project, how do you actually do that? So what I'm going to share in the chat is there's a new project canvas that they released that they're encouraging us to use in order to kind of take those projects that we've been working on and move those forward. A couple more things I'll say about projects pretty quickly, and that is that while there have been several projects that have been identified, that's not the end all be all of projects. If folks who are talking here, they're in Slack or they're on the Facebook group, if they're interested in moving a project forward, all it really requires is finding one or two like-minded folks to work on it with you. Now we ask, in order to not waste time and try and take the benefit of other folks who are adding value, we ask that you share those in places like these calls. But it's open to anyone to participate. So I'm sharing that link now. Anything else on projects that I might be forgetting, Hassan?
No, I think you covered it, Eric.
And I see a note that my internet connection is a little unstable, so I'm probably going to stop my video. But I'm here. I'll probably chime back in later if it looks like things are going okay. So let's see. So I just shared that. Is there other big news that folks want to share, either from the field? I know, well, I should acknowledge there's a couple of different events and activities that are happening this week that are, pulling some folks away that might otherwise participate. So Jackie Dietrich in Denver, she's a key part of what happens with Denver Startup Week, which is going as of today. We know quite a few folks who are involved with the Rural Rise Summit. So Co-Starters is helping put that together, but a lot of folks I want to say that's in Oklahoma this week. And then the SEN Startup Champions Network, they've got their summit there. They convene twice a year. I want to say that starts this afternoon, evening. So several people like Cecilia, for instance, are on planes, et cetera, heading to Wisconsin for that. Any other big things that folks want to share, big news from the world of ecosystem building?
What were the other two summits, Eric, that you mentioned besides Startup Champions Network Summit?
So one was a rural, it's tough for me to say that sometimes, Rural Rise. So RURAL, Rise. And I think that's listed as a summit. I know there's spacing on the name of one of the organizations, but I know Co-Starters is helping put that together. It's substantially involved, I'll put it that way. I don't want to, I don't want to give too much credit for anyone, but I know they've been involved in some of the organization behind the scenes on that. The other isn't exactly a summit, but one of the bigger startup weeks that happens in North America, which is the Denver Startup Week. I went last year, actually SEN did their summit there last year. Many thousands of people getting together, startup entrepreneurs, funders, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool, thanks.
Any other big news to share from the world of ecosystem building around the world? I love when you're on the call, Chad, because it's global and it makes me feel good.
Yeah, well, from Australia, nothing major. Well, one of the things I'm really interested in, I noticed one of them mentioned somebody, Dan, I think you mentioned collective impact. Aligning with the collaborative culture theme, I'm interested in an emerging move I'm seeing towards collective impact and backbone organizations applied to ecosystem building. Collective impact typically being for wicked problems in society, seeing it more and more towards ecosystem building. You've got MIT, who has their REAP program, Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, which they run at a region-wide basis. You've got Techstars doing their ecosystem building down in Louisville, previously up in British Columbia, so doing the trials there. You got ESHIP communities. So this movement towards creating these collaborative bodies to bring people together. We heard a few examples during the calls, focused typically on a group, whether it's microbreweries or technology like blockchain or a region. So interested in sort of formal structures to do that without adding bureaucracy. And also continuing the conversation I think we had last time on kind of programs in a box type approach, things like Co-Starters is looked to do a bit. And I'm constantly bumping into people that are doing train the trainer models and that kind of thing, which I think is great and needed, but also I think we risk, like if everybody's doing train the trainer models to help entrepreneurs, it actually creates a bit more noise. And I don't know if that's viable. So finding a way to make some sense out of that movement. So those are the two things I'm interested in. As far as taking that forward, whether that's project teams, whether that's in this call or where we take that, or if there's already things happening in that space.
Yeah, we're working towards the collective impact model here in Pennsylvania, and the challenge has been, we've been successful in educating the community as to what entrepreneurship is and why it's important. But the actors in the ecosystem have not been incentivized to come together and look at the collective impact model and agree to it. So when it was Darcella said earlier, their ecosystem actors came together and agreed on 4 things. I'd love to learn more about that, and hopefully we'll be able to come across that finish line sooner rather than later. So any other examples of successful collective impact focused ecosystem building out there would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll probably just briefly on that. One of the things that's embedded in the MIT REAP project is a must-win battle. Like focusing people on what is that one thing that you want to solve, or that one thing you want to leverage in your community, and getting out of the existential. Like I was part of a collective impact conversation down in Tasmania, and you realize that a lot of people don't come around the table because they're just getting on with it and they're doing stuff. And a lot of times the collective impact talks too much about being collective impact rather than just getting it done. So really having, what is that one thing we can focus our attention on? It's almost like a bait and switch where we solve a wicked problem and you turn around and realize that we've been doing collective impact and creating a backbone, but kind of almost after the fact. So I'd be interested in other perspectives on, yeah, exactly as you say, Beth. What is that thing that we focus our attention on?
Hey, this is Dan. I just think for us, it's about finding that common language because, we all have our own definitions for certain terms. So I think it's a lot about it is finding that common language. For us, it was the UN SDGs, but there could be there's the Global Impact Investing Network, the IRIS, is typically more broad as far as impact investing. So it's geared towards investors, but they have a lot of information in there in general of like how to gauge impact. And so for us, it's about finding that common language, and we're still working through exactly how to capture all that information. But we are definitely, that was our biggest issue at the beginning, because again, we call things differently across even just this area, the Pittsburgh area. So.
Hi, this is Patricia. And when we had our entrepreneurship summit here in Washington, we broke into groups to decide what we wanted to focus on. And there were a couple of things that really came up to the top. And one of them was breaking down silos between universities and the various types of incubators that are existing, because there's obviously this pull. So that was a big one that has been tackled a little bit, but not a whole lot. The other was infrastructure, because there were not a lot of lab spaces for life sciences here, and so that's now been tackled by some of the bigger real estate investment groups to actually make lab space available. The other was early stage funding, because there's not been, we used to have a very large state fund that would fund early stage opportunities, and that was pulled back into the general fund. So we focused on those three things and continued to carry that theme for a period of a year, trying to have some discussions with various groups about how we would tackle those. So those were our three big ones.
This is Darcella. So I'd be happy to individually talk with anyone about kind of how we eventually brought this whole collective thing together. It was a 2-year process, and there's still a couple of things that aren't quite working well, but at least we agreed upon some things. And so I said 4 things. It actually was ended up being 5. And I think the challenge for us originally was that most of the organizations that were participating were doing it because we knew someone who was doing it. And for myself, for example, I agreed to go to the meetings because a friend of mine asked me, right? So I didn't really buy in. I just did it to help her. And so it took me at least 6 months to realize, oh, wait a minute, they're actually doing something. Like, it's not just another meeting about equity. And then we started doing the work. And so it was a matter of getting decision makers to the table who can actually commit their organization to doing something and saying, we will figure out how to make what we find out work in our own individual missions. So that was the first piece of it. And so the part that we're still having a struggle with is equitable distribution of resources. So getting funders to come to the table. They've said we're interested. We'd be happy to see what you all do. But now it's getting them actually to the table to distribute funds.
I can't believe that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right, I know.
So,
I mean, we all agree these are worthy projects, right? I mean, come on.
does anyone, we were talking, we had an attempt at an ecosystem convener meeting last week, and there were a few people there, but the question on my mind was, the funders say to us, come together with one voice. But they say it to us individually. They don't step out and publicly demand that the ecosystem come to them with one voice. And they would, but again, they'll say to us individually that are frustrated with different organizations coming at them from different directions. And they don't know which is what's real and what really needs to be funded and what the priorities should be. And it seems like such a simple solution. Has anybody else experienced either the group coming together to ask for funding with one voice, or the same frustrations that I've experienced?
Hi, this is Dan again. So the answer is yes, frustration.
Yeah.
We actually are in the process of creating a survey and some research to kind of collect all the data to help with the collective impact. And the funders are the ones who said that they wanted this to happen. And so we requested that they were able to send the survey out to everyone and not just the people that are in our intermediary group and then the people we serve. And they'd be like, they said, we prefer you to reach out to them instead.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't want their name on it.
It's two interesting points there. One of them, the comment on people coming along because someone asked. I forget whether it's Feld's book or Rainforest, but they give that great example where you can make the logical case, the rational case. You can try and say, motivate based on fear and all these things, and ultimately it comes down to just tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, come on, this will be fun. But also taking the point that only lasts for so long, and potentially that is why we see people getting engaged. It's exciting at first, but then there's not that heartfelt buy-in. That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought too much about that before. And the other one is agree with the notion that everybody says this needs to be done, but it's almost like everybody's waiting for somebody to coordinate it and lead it and manage it, and nobody really wants to be the one to do that because everybody's off on their own thing. So everybody intuitively knows. But I think everybody's just as confused and frustrated. I think, applying a bit of grace to all of us. We're all just looking at this saying, oh, well, it's hard, it's complex, it seems so easy, which I think is a bit deceptive. But then is there a common framework? I think that's why Feld's book just resonated so much, because and the same thing with Rainforest, it kind of starts making sense of this, but the actual execution on getting this across the number of regions globally that are having the same narrative, the same challenge, and we're all looking at this, and I think that's the purpose of these groups, is to say, well, is there some scaffolding we can put around this process where all it takes is somebody says, hey, this is a problem, great, let's fit it into a bit of a framework without being too prescriptive, because every region is just so vastly different.
This is Darcella. So yes, so the answer to the question for us about kind of a framework is, we finally had to find one large nonprofit that was willing to step up and be sort of the fiscal agent and say, you know what, we'll pick up the cost for food. We'll have meetings. We will do that as our part. And once they were able to do that, kind of eliminating that barrier of, well, we can't have a meeting because no one has bagels, right? So once we got rid of all that, and the rest of the people kind of started falling around, it ended up being about 20 organizations that were really doing the work, and about 100 kind of on the peripheral going, oh, what are you guys doing over there? And maybe showing up every now and then. But now that we have about 20 of us that are really committed, it has been easy to pull together a formal kind of committee. We've assigned tasks to each other. We hold each other accountable for what we said we were going to do in that meeting. It's been really interesting, and it has it has helped us get some funding to actually hire someone to be the collective director. And so the first thing we agreed upon at the very beginning was that we can't all keep doing this as a part of our mission, right? We can't just, I can't keep assigning this as another duty to another one of my staff members. So we finally did pull together enough to be able to finally go out and hire 2 people. So 1 director and sort of 1 part-time assistant. And I think that's going to make the difference here, and that you'll actually have someone whose job it is to keep us all, you know, on task and in alignment with what we said we could do.
So did you align with the collective impact framework and backbone organization type? Was that narrative ever used through that process?
You know, since I do veterans and military families, it was, I mean, they were using it, but we always saw ourselves as kind of outside of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We never really fully played in the sandbox completely in the beginning. We were always collaborative and we always, you know, showed up and supported. But whenever they would have, you know, entrepreneurship ecosystem meetings, we were like, yeah, we're super military. We don't know what you guys are doing. We're going to go do our own thing, right? And we'll help out. And it was a shift internally. I keep saying we. Mostly the we is me, right? It was an internal shift with myself going, you know, if you really would pay attention to what these guys are doing, this would be easier. Like you wouldn't have such a hard time knocking down doors. And so going back to, I think it was Beth, or maybe it was Patricia. Was it Patricia that said, you know, about the funders? We had that same thing. We had a lot of large funders going, oh yeah, you guys come together, we'll help out. And then when we did come together, and so 2 of them did step up. So our conversation to them is, now it's your turn to put the pressure on your counterparts. Like we're not in the same country club, so you're gonna have to, you know, when you're all eating your hors d'oeuvres, you're gonna need to say, oh, and by the way, we stepped up. So that's how we're tackling it.
Well, 2 comments. This is Patricia. Two comments. One is, when I was talking about this Cascadia Corridor initiative that is going on from British Columbia all the way down to Portland, Oregon, and mainly focused on I will say Seattle and Vancouver, because there's a lot of relationships there. This idea was funded by Microsoft because Microsoft essentially couldn't find enough people to hire to be in Seattle, so they actually put an outpost in Vancouver, and then it broadened into other other ecosystems that would garner from some input, like the life science industry. But one of the things that was important in pulling this together was not just to have a corporate sponsor, but also to have somebody who was a very, like a KOL, a trusted leader from the region that would step up and say, you know, I'll be the figurehead for this. I need the help to do this work, but you know, you can put my name on it. And so for us, it was our former governor, Christine Gregoire, who stepped up for Washington, and it was, you know, one of the ministers up in Canada, Minister of Entrepreneurship in Canada, who stepped up and said, we want to make this happen too. So you have to have those kinds of well-trusted people to step up, and, you know, having an executive director that's willing to push and take the minutes and reach out a lot is important. But if they're a very junior person, you know, the government is not going to take notice. But if it's a powerhouse person who is willing to, you know, at least put their name on it, you'll get a lot further. The second thing regarding funding is, and all those 4 different areas that I mentioned that we decided we were going to focus on, is to have groups in each one of those areas. So in terms of funding, we got strategic investors together and said, okay, what would you like to see? How could we facilitate getting groups in front of you that you would be willing to talk to, look at, and potentially fund? What would it look like for you that you wanted? So in each of those areas, we focused on getting those groups together, and had a group of like 5 people that was the subgroup for infrastructure or funding or breaking down silos and how to develop that collaborative culture better. So I think that's important as well. But I think you need a big figurehead that is well respected in your area to say, you know, we want to do this. Not just executive directors and assistants that can help do things. That's from my own experience. You get better traction.
Those are both exceptional points, that kind of figurehead advocacy type role, and then those specific project teams, because quite often people aren't engaged with overarching, let's build ecosystems, let's help this particular area, but they are specific to, you know, I want to solve this one particular problem because that's my thing, and you can get that 4 or 5 coalition of the willing. And again, on that, was there any sort of name of a framework or anything like that, or did you guys just do it because that was the thing that looked like it needed to be done?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear. I didn't hear the question.
Did that all of those actions and the outcomes that you just described, from getting those figureheads and forming those strategic groups, did that just kind of evolve, or was that an intentional action saying this is what needs to be done?
Well, with the infrastructure and the funding and the breaking down silos stuff, that came out of our entrepreneurship summit that we held in life sciences in Washington State 2 years ago. And we broke into groups in the afternoon, much like we did at the entrepreneurship summit, breaking into the various groups back in Kansas City, and said, what do we want to focus on? And they naturally broke up that, you know, some people really felt that funding was necessary, and we ended up having 2 groups in funding, 2 groups in infrastructure, 2 groups in collaborative culture, and then I think there was another one that, you know, people didn't seem to care quite as much about. But those groups then coalesced, and each group had probably 10 people in them. And I would say there were, you know, 2 to 3 people from each one of those groups that then coalesced into a subgroup that said, we're going to carry this on and try and figure out some solutions and get back together. The idea was that we would get back together after a year, much like we're doing with the ESHIP Summit stuff, and carry on some of the projects and, you know, what kind of changes have occurred. And some of the people that were there were people that could make a difference. So like Alexandria Real Estate builds a lot of labs across the world for early stage companies and for bigger companies too. And they said, there's not enough small lab space for life science companies. We ought to focus on that. And they ended up coming up with a way to put a launch labs, you know, small labs that people can actually rent month to month on their credit card, you know, or a lab bench, to inspire entrepreneurship. So there were different kinds of things that came up because we brought those ideas up, and they took it and ran with it and said, I think we have a solution that will fit that. And so some of those things have now, you know, almost had a resolution to some degree. Others they're still being worked on. And then the summit never got together for year 2 because the Institute fell apart. But there are still a lot of people working on various aspects of this more independently. Does that help?
Hey, this is Eric. I'm chiming in from a different direction for a second. So one thing that I like about what we're talking about is a lot of what we're talking about does touch on some of the other goals like sustainability and funding, things like that. But, you know, whether it's collective impact or the work that you did with the summit, that really gets to the kind of the heart of this convening. How do we create these collaborations? How do we plant the seeds so that they, you know, are sustainable? So thanks for asking the question, Chad, and thanks for that information. That's been great.
And one of the things, like, and I'm conscious, I didn't want to hijack the call or anything, but you know, if there's a project team forming up, because this is the area that I'm in at the moment, is creating this scaffolding around these things. I hear a lot of these stories, and they all have certain common themes. You know, creating this leadership team that comes around, getting a main advocate, finding ways to measure the impact, and I think we can expedite this process in regions if we provide a bit more of a framework around it. So I'm happy to work with people and to help do that, which would then facilitate it to some of the train-the-trainer models and other outcomes. It's not like a program in a box type thing, but it is more of a 2 to 3 year journey and providing a bit more of a framework around it. So just people that want to hop onto that, I'm happy to contribute to that as one of the outcomes from this, if that would add value.
Yeah, me too. That's where I feel like we can actually have a strong impact, is not putting it in a box, but giving it some framework and some guidelines. Happy to help.
Part of that as well. This is Beth.
Yeah, that sounds excellent.
So what's the next steps on that one? Should I just do a project canvas, put it up? I'm just looking at the goal things at the moment, and then send off to that Gmail email.
Yeah, so I just shared again. So there's actually, this is something different, but it basically gives information about how to start a project team. So there's like a whole page they put together to help put that together. I think that includes the Canvas, but I'll put, already shared a little bit more information on that Canvas before. Because I do think that oftentimes we need to start earlier than we think. So just thinking through what needs to happen, I think the framework idea that you've got is a really good one. Let's see, any other resources we have that we should share again in here? I lost some of my links from earlier.
If you want, I could share the summary from our entrepreneurship summit. I mean, it's life science based, but it's about 15 slides that we kind of put together to share with people as the general outcome. I'd be happy to share that with the group if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And I think one of the important takeaways from that, like, there's a range of things how these things can start. Quite often they do just evolve out of conferences, around meetings, things like that, naturally, organically, of leaders coming together. But I think if we could take the common elements of 100 stories and say, how did they start? How did they get together? Where did they fall apart? Where did the structure of it? And there's a whole framework around collective impact and backbones that was emerging. There's some great research out of Cincinnati. They looked at them over 5 or 6 years, and it has been pointed at typically, poverty, homelessness, youth disengagement, global spread of disease, that kind of thing. And it's just now being applied to entrepreneur activities, forming naturally. So I just want to explore what that might look like if we were to apply the framework more intentionally, and capturing some of the stories we've been heard on this call, and saying what are common elements, and is there a shared narrative that we can do to help other people doing similar kind of things in regions.
While I've got you all here, so is there anybody on the call who's particularly interested in any of the other projects that have been announced before, or perhaps you're working on them, or you're interested in getting involved, etc.? Any questions about those? They are, just in case. So the ones that were proposed earlier and have had at least a little bit of work done on them, primarily it's the first and last one, which is regional ESHIP summits, and then there was the training and tools for building collaborative culture, and this kind of related to that 2.31. The other one that I have not heard very much about at all is this field ambassador training program. But is there anyone interested in more information about any of those, or participating, etc.?
Well, certainly the regional ESHIP summit. We were planning one here with the Cascadia corridor. Also been trying to plan one in Arizona. Again, the one in Arizona is more life science based. And then, so I'm happy to help there, and I'd like more information about the ambassador as well, because I think that it would be really nice if we could share our experiences around the country.
Now, for folks on the call, how many are, show of hands, I only have 3 videos right now. How many folks are a part of the Facebook group, first of all, and then also the Slack group? The Facebook, we got a couple.
No.
All right. Oh, yeah, shaking head, I like it. I would be giving thumbs up too, but thanks, I appreciate it. So what we'll do, you should be getting a follow-up. I'll make sure that we do this. I'm not sure how the information is being disseminated, but I think we've got all your emails from signing up to this and other ESHIP channels. If not, please make sure you've emailed ESHIP goals. Is that ESHIPgoals@gmail.com? make sure that they've got your information, and we will do a handshake behind the scenes so that you're getting a copy of the updated notes, because that's got a bunch of different links from both this call and the previous call. But we're at 1:55. Any other topics, any other things that we definitely want to cover before we wrap up today?
No, apart from saying thanks, Teach, for the discussion, like some really great insights. And I absolutely love the stories. On the other projects, I'm keen to be a bit of a lurker, but on the train the trainer model, or kind of a program in a box, keen to contribute on that one. Not sure, how do you actually get involved in an existing project team, and do those already have canvases up, and are there people working on that? That was a question.
That was a question. Yeah, I'd like the same answer.
I don't think we know yet. I haven't seen anything on the dashboard, but I haven't been looking for the last 24 hours anyway. I know I sent our project canvas for Goal 6 Initiative 2 in a while ago, but again, I haven't seen it posted yet.
Sounds like we're talking about posting the new canvases. What is that? What we're looking at is how that's gone, or what are we looking at right now?
Is it on the dashboard? Is that where we're to look for them?
Yeah, how do we get engaged with, like, are there existing projects, and how do we engage with them, find out the status? Yeah, that.
Yeah, I'm action oriented. I'm happy to talk about it, but I also like to get things done.
So what let's see, I guess what we're trying to do is to start getting, at the very least, some kind of a check-in on this call for folks who are participating in projects. That hasn't yet happened, but then again, that's that project information, a lot of that was just released last week. So we haven't yet seen that, I think, happen in a real effective way. You know, I'm hopeful that heads in the right direction, but right now, that's the idea, is that those folks kind of huddle on these calls, give a really quick update, and then folks who are participating in the call, if they're interested in participating, we have kind of an on-ramp for them to do so.
So are there currently projects for this goal that are in play?
So I'd say there's definitely work that's happening right now on the regional ESHIPs. It feels, and just personally, it feels like there's a little bit of morphing, so that the ESHIP in a box, regional ESHIP are to some degree getting combined. So I have to say it's pretty fuzzy. I know Startup Champions has got some interest in this, and they've been doing a little bit of work. Forward Cities has got some interest, and Jackie and I have been talking a little bit about some version of this. So I wouldn't call any of those necessarily super productive teams at this moment, but they're kind of nascent, but they've at least had some conversations and some direction to them.
So they do have a canvas, and are there teams formed, and do they have outcomes? Are they working through it, or was it people that said, this sounds like a good idea, and they're kind of doing their thing right now?
The one that I can talk to is the one that I've been talking with both Jackie and actually, let's see, Tiffany Henry as well, and that's on the regional ESHIP. I think that it's basically been on hold, waiting for the new project campuses to come out. I think we're interested in bringing other folks on. So right now it does not have it's not like being managed like a project yet. So it's in the about to phase.
So how do we, other than to tell you, how do we put our hand up and say we're game to help?
Telling me, at least at this point, is the best way to do it. Also,
okay.
What I can do, so I can do that, and also what I'll also do is an invite to Slack to anybody who's interested, and there's actually a sub, I forget what they're called, but one of those little communication channels for that project that's in Slack as well.
Okay.
And I'll invite you to that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so keen to be a part of that, just whether it's observing or contributing in some way, because I have this idea for an ESHIP summit in Australia, but just the magnitude of it and just the volume of other types of activities happening. I may not focus on that for the next 12 months, but I'm keen to learn. But as far as this collective impact and that narrative that we're just having there, if that forms into a project team, I'm happy to be a part of that. And by the next meeting, I'll send through the canvas and then whatever has to happen to spin that up.
Yeah, I'd say, and in some ways, a lot of these things are still coming together. I think what we've learned so far with the conversation about regional ESHIP is we probably need to start earlier and start more bite-sized than we were initially imagining. And that's something that's, yeah, needs to be sorted out as far as what does constitute a minimum viable, say, regional ESHIP summit. And I distinguish that from, say, an entrepreneurship summit of some kind, where the idea behind the regional ESHIP is how do we take a sort of a more bite-sized regional approach to what happens at ESHIP, where you're inviting together ecosystem builders so that they can come together to find out, what are their common needs, how can they potentially work together to grow that region and make that more developed, especially for the folks who can't, always make it to Kansas City. So that's really the focus of that, which has some overlap with more of an entrepreneurial kind of summit that might bring ESHIP or ecosystem builders together, but is not exactly the same thing. A different thing that I'll say came up, I want to say on the last call here and at least one other call, is maybe these regional ESHIP summits, they're sort of a sidecar or their side meeting or something that happens alongside some other larger event. So let's say there's the big event that's happening up in Concordia. So the focus wouldn't be this regional ESHIP work that's around ecosystem building, but that might be maybe a half-day meeting that happens, as it starts, or, the first afternoon, something like that. How do we combine forces so that we're not needing to get, our own venue, that there's some critical mass, et cetera. So that's some of the discussion that I've heard and been part of around that goal, or that project. If that helps. It's messy.
So Chad, are you volunteering to kind of take the lead on drafting the canvas for the project around collective impact?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm doing a PhD at the moment, and that the establishment of some sort of collaborative body and a framework to do that as a kind of a soft connectivity issue in a region is where I landed on. So I'm happy to drive that, but it's so big, and even the stories that we heard in this phone call, there's so many other people that have such vast experience. I'll start it, but then definitely keen to have other people come on board and share part of it.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, let's see, we are actually a little bit over time on this call. So I'm not going to ask for a final word or anything for anyone, but if there's any other last thing that anybody really wants to share, please chime in.
I just want to say this was a great call. I mean, the conversation and the discussion that happened, a lot of great stuff came out of this call. So just thank you to everyone.
Agreed. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks heaps.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
See you, mate.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.